The college back in the 70s, even then, was very interested in using technology to teach students. And of course, we were thinking about reel-to-reel tapes, cassette tapes, film strips, microfilm, ditto machines. We had, overhead projectors. We had just books and books and books of overhead projector films that we bought from, from suppliers that were professionally done, and then we had the ones that we made. We could buy films, or rent films, but you had to fill out a request, take it to the library, and wait 6 months to get it, and then you might have had that film for a day or two, and then you had to send it back, but that was a special treat. So that was high tech back in those days. We also had in the L building something that would amaze people now. We had a room, a lecture room, a rather large lecture room that had something called the student response system in it. So it was a technological tool that would allow students to sit in their seats and respond to a question that a professor had, a multiple choice question. And then they would select, using their response system, A, B, C, or D to answer that question. And the instructor would get real-time feedback from the students to assess their learning. Now, of course, we call it Kahoot and clickers. But in the 1970s, we actually had something in place that people could use. And that was really cutting edge, wasn't it? So we had our laboratories, but we also had sort of an outdoor environment that we could take students out to learn. So in the front of the college, where parking lot A is now, right outside of DH, that used to be a woods with a nature trail that we actually, the faculty, we literally dug that nature trail through the woods. So we were out there, identifying wildflowers and putting plaques on trees and literally cutting a trail through the woods. That's what faculty did in the 70s. That's the kind of the spirit, I guess, the pioneering spirit that we had. So the leadership of the college, Dr. Smith, Dr. Donato, who was our vice president, I don't know whether it was called a dean or a vice president back in those days, had very clear vision for how we would structure the curriculum and how we would build the curriculum. And you have to remember, back in the 70s, we were generating courses, programs. Everything was brand new. Everything had to be built. And I think that they recognized that students learn at their own pace and in their own way, and that they come to us with different backgrounds and different sets of experiences. And Howard Community College, from the beginning to this day, includes a very diverse body of students. So when I think about the students that were here in the 70s, we had some students that were coming to us right out of high school that had recent academic experiences. We had a fair number of older students. I think the average student age was probably in the late 20s. Somehow 27, 28 seems to stick in my mind. We had a lot of Vietnam veterans on campus. We had career changers. We had women that were coming back to school after their kids started elementary school. So we had this very rich, diverse population, but then they were all they had their, some of them were rusty in terms of math and basic skills, and some of them had just come out of college. So taking that into consideration, it led to some practices here, like mastery learning. So the idea that a student could take a test over and over and over again until they master the objectives, they master the content. A grading system that not only included A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's, but also included L's, which were grades that were given to students that, so you either didn't pass a class because it was too difficult for you, but you gave it everything you had, or maybe you didn't pass a class because you were unable to attend class. So, there were different reasons for not being successful, and the grading system tried to recognize that. We did a lot of pre- and post-testing, trying to figure out where students were when they came to us so that we could figure out how to kind of get them through the course content. I think the college, and I would credit Dr. Smith and Dr. Donato with this, understood that most students can learn anything if you give them enough support. And I think that's what the intention was with all of these practices. Under Dr. Smith's leadership, we adopted a systems approach to building our curriculum, and I believe it emerged from the 1950s and 1960s from the military and from businesses. So I'm a biologist who's interested in physiology, and so I absolutely understood what they were trying to do. The learning experience is dependent on many, many, many interconnecting variables, right? You know, what do you know when you show up? What is it that you have to know? How do you learn? Is it your particular learning style? Is it a particular bit of content might be learned better this way, whereas something else might require a different approach? And the nice thing about it, in the 70s, the college had hired a full-time instructional designer to help all of the faculty get through this process of developing their courses systematically. From that, we looked at our courses and we created measurable, detailed learning objectives for everything that we were going to teach. And then we had to create assessment items that were linked to those objectives. So I remember many, many days sitting in the presence of the instructional designer, who was Al Mizell, in the presence of other faculty, writing these measurable learning objectives in behavioral terms and writing assessments that were linked to each and every objective. I mean, it took weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, as you can imagine. And then the next step of the systems approach was, okay, so now that we've got these measurable learning objectives and we've got these assessment items, what resources are we going to provide to students to help them learn the material? And it was designed to recognize the variability of our students and the variability in the behavioral objectives themselves. And then what we try to do is for every objective, and I can just take a simple course like anatomy and physiology where I might have had, say, 200 objectives for the lecture only, it's not, to find 3 or 4 different modalities that would be linked to each objective that a student could choose from to learn. So that was interesting, and it was actually very instructive because it really helped me understand what resources were out there for me too. And then, of course, at the end of all this, you know, there was the assessment and, you know, the constant refining of what we did to make it better and better. So, you know, we talk about many things that have been consistent from the time the college opened till now, and this culture of collecting data and making decisions based on data has been here from the beginning. And I think that's something that has made us really unique. And then, of course, after we were fully committed to developing our courses systematically, then we added a new element to this, and that's the element of humanistic education. So in addition to creating a curriculum using the systems approach, we also thought it was important to think about our students as individuals and try to address the needs of the whole student. So, you know, I think this ultimately led to us thinking about more student-centered learning, even decades down the road, you know, active learning, team-based learning, the development of all those soft skills, you know, that we talk about, particularly in some of our cohort programs, and personal development, meaningful learning, you know, making sure that students can buy into it because they believe in it and they think it's valuable, and also establishing relationships with our students, which was much easier to do in the old days when we only had a handful of students in our classes, but I think it's something that we continue to do and continue to strive to do. The faculty were young, and they were 100% focused on making education accessible to everybody. So, you know, you're in a research institution, everybody's focused on their research, right? And you think that's the way it should be, and then you come to a place where what they really care about is teaching excellence. They certainly wanted to maintain, and we still want to maintain, high academic standards, but making education accessible, instructional innovation. I mean, these were things that I hadn't anticipated The faculty here were 100% committed to being good teachers. I mean, that was the number one goal for each and every one of us, was to become a better teacher. Being a community college, we were always interested in responding to any kind of need or request from the community in terms of our programming, our courses. Again, we talked about this before, but making data-driven decisions, always important. The assessment of student learning, we talk about it now. Institutions talk about it now like it's kind of a new idea, but we've been doing it since I came here. And I don't know whether this was just a product of the 60s and the 70s and the hippie generation, but it was a very inclusive environment. Everybody had a voice. Everybody's voice was important. I mean, people didn't buy a paperclip unless everybody had a voice. Students were important. The student voice was really important. And I think the other thing, and this really struck me when I first came here, and it struck me from the first day, that we're really a very kind and compassionate community here. That we're good colleagues, and that we care about each other, and that we support each other. And that was something that I hadn't expected and I hadn't seen before. And there wasn't a level of competition, or we were all in it together, and we really cared about each other and supported each other. So yes, we are sitting in our brand new Science, Engineering, and Technology building, about 149,000 square feet of loveliness, and cutting-edge resources for faculty and students. And we've been here for approximately a year. We moved in May of 2017, and we started the design about 4 years prior to that, so 2013 to 2015, 2 years of design, 2 years of construction. It was important to me, since the faculty and the staff had to live in this building and spend most of their waking hours in this building, that they have a say. You think about having your voice heard. I wanted everybody's voice heard. I wanted everybody to have input into literally every decision that we made. Now, people said to me that that was just a really crazy idea. They said, you will never make a decision if you have 30-some people, giving input about everything. But it worked out really well. Again, I think it's just, it's a testament to the kind of culture that we have here. The people are respectful, and they're collaborative, and they work together, and that's always been the case. So for the faculty and the staff, it was important for us to have a building that reflected science in as many areas as possible. So we wanted a teaching opportunity wherever we could place a teaching opportunity. So, for example, the boulders that you find outside the building were actually hand-selected by the geology faculty to reflect examples from different areas in the state of Maryland. And then the plants around the boulders kind of connect to the boulders themselves. And so if you come here on any day, you might see whole classes of geology students outside, looking at the boulders. So they're not just decorative. We have lights in the building that resemble benzene rings that are hanging from the ceiling. So we wanted the science to be reflected in the open spaces. We didn't want the open spaces to just be kind of boring hallways. We wanted them to be tasteful representations of science in its various forms. So the technology in the classrooms is pretty remarkable. We also don't have a front of the classroom. So if you go into our classrooms, you'll notice the instructor stations are generally in the corner or on the side, which means the instructor is not the focal point and the spotlight is not shining on them. The instructor is then more free to walk around and interact with students and, present things from any part of the room. We have a dedicated space for undergraduate research now. We have analytical equipment in there to support all kinds of activities in chemistry, biology, and we have advanced microscopy. We have spectrophotometers that are advanced. We have like an atomic absorption spectrophotometer. We have lots of high-end equipment for students to work on research projects with faculty. We have a greenhouse And of course, the greenhouse, like all the other parts of the building, is high tech. So it has a computer-based system for watering, controlling humidity, controlling light. So no more coming in on the weekends and watering plants. Or if it gets too hot in there, the shades just automatically drop to cool the room down. Our engineering facility is so much better than what we had before, and what we had before was pretty good. But we've got a huge build room for students to work on projects of all types. They can fly drones in there. We have a 2-ton crane to move heavy objects around the room and from outside to inside, so they can bring motors and cars and things into the room through a garage door and work on it. We have 3D printers, just top-notch 3D printers that print in different materials and colors. That's another thing that's really cool about this building. We've got a rooftop observatory. So before this time, we had telescopes, portable telescopes, that if we wanted to do an observation, we would take them to the 4th level of the east parking garage. And we would have to pull them out and then ask the facilities and plant ops to not let anybody park up there all day, which was kind of a problem. So now we've got our own observatory up there, and we've got all new telescopes. We have a solar telescope. We are getting very soon a research-grade telescope for our exoplanet project. We've got a warming room. We've got computers up there. We can actually project the things that the students are seeing up in the night sky to the monitors in the lobby. Yeah. So for the people that don't want to go up there and get cold, they can just sit in the lobby and watch. And our research students on the exoplanet project are literally spending entire nights up on that roof looking for exoplanets in the nighttime sky. So yeah, so that's amazing. That facility up there is amazing. We had a strong interest in developing undergraduate research experiences for our students, understanding that when a lot of us were in school, students didn't really get to do research until they were graduate students. But you know, the direction that the colleges and universities are taking now is to expose students to undergraduate research very early, as early as possible. We also had a growing number of faculty who were scientists that still wanted to do research. And we were building a new building. So all of these things came together at the same time. And with a little bit of assistance from a National Science Foundation grant, we developed a pretty comprehensive program for undergraduate research. So students are able to come in their freshman year and hit the ground running. So they begin in their freshman year in the fall, and they end in the spring of their sophomore year with a completed project. And we have had about, in the past 3 years, we've had about 44 students either currently in the program or who have finished the program. And many of those students who have completed the program have left and continue to pursue research in their transfer institutions at Cornell and University of Maryland College Park and various places.